But off to the right-hand side where you see that pole, the light pole, yeah, you can see them there, and now they're moving to the front of the line of cars, and not sure.
And the police are ahead of the line of vehicles, as you can see there as well.
Not sure what they're going to do at this point, but they are in their riot gear. They are prepared, and those people trying to block any access by other people or cars from going through and getting onto the Bay Bridge and into San Francisco at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately, that sign on that vehicle, that SUV right in front of us, is pointed backwards, so we don't know what it says to the people behind that line of cars. But as you can see, they are attached. So, as it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, this was pretty well planned. They figured out a way to move in one line across traffic and then stop at the same time and then link these cars together. So they had obviously a deliberate plan, deliberate objective in mind as they sought to make their point. Black health matters. Still want to know specifically what that means.
Right. And, you know, there have been protests throughout the afternoon through Oakland. In fact, there were some protesters who stopped traffic for a time on different roadways as they seek in their way to make a point on this Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day on this Monday.
Yeah, this woman that was a little exercised earlier is now roaming around kicking cones and pulling trash out of cars and throwing it on the roadway. So she is a bit more emotional than some of the others that we've seen.
Others appear to just be, you know, talking, gathering, not doing much. It seems like they were trying to get her to calm down for a little bit. It looks like they're just kind of leaving her alone at this point. But we have seen police out there. They brought up those signs that were laid out onto the ground, and there are some signs on top of the cars. So far, we haven't seen a lot of tension or anything between police. You can see now, you can see the line of police officers standing there in front and making sure the line of people don't move any farther onto the bridge, but the cars, the backup now is just gathering all the way down past the toll plaza at this point.
Yeah. The good news for motorists is this is a very light traffic day. That doesn't help you if you're one of the hundreds and now thousands of cars stuck in this, but imagine if this was happening on a regular work day without a holiday. It would be much more significant. That woman still holding court and talking with fellow protesters.
Very animated, shouting. It doesn't seem like, it's not a huge group of people though compared to what we see in protests, but
dozen maybe.
Yeah, enough in front there. But
you can see this is not the double-decker area of the bridge yet.
Right.
This is that's the new span to the tunnel, but this is the new span.
And look at the backup now as it stretches all the way. We saw it over at the toll plaza just a few moments ago, and you can only imagine it's just continuing to back up at this point. You made a good point. It's a holiday. Traffic is a little bit lighter today, which is good, but now if you're stuck in this, nowhere to go on the bridge, you're not getting off the bridge. You can only imagine the frustration by a lot of those drivers at this point, not knowing what's happening or if they're going to get moving again. Now you can see where the cars are backed up beyond the toll plaza at this point.
Okay, now we want to go talk about, Amma mentioned another protest in Oakland. It began at 14th Street and Broadway and is currently at the Bay Street Mall in Emeryville. ABC 7 News reporter Alyssa Harrington is there live where protesters are still rallying. Alyssa, what's the scene there? We can see what's happening from Sky 7 HD on the Bay Bridge. What are you experiencing?
Well, Dan, Amma, that march did start in Oakland, and it was supposed to end here in Emeryville. But as you mentioned, many demonstrators have continued onto the Bay Bridge. Now, the reason they wanted to march here to Emeryville is this shopping mall behind me is built on a Native American burial ground. They wanted to raise awareness about that. And also, just 1 year ago, police shot and killed a suspected shoplifter. So they wanted to raise awareness. This is MLK Day, and they say that today they honor his legacy, but they don't just want to talk about everything that you learned in school, his I Have a Dream speech. They want to talk about some of these other things that he did to really make a change. Some of these things that maybe weren't so popular at the time, that caused a lot of controversy, but that now we look back and we see just how much he really did for the country. So starting in Oakland earlier, about 1,000 people, it was a very large group, gathered at Frank Ogawa Plaza. Some people gave speeches. They were with the Third Liberation Party, I believe was their name. And they did urge the crowd not to resort to violence today. They wanted to keep everything peaceful. And so the group that is on the Bay Bridge right now, we're not sure which group exactly they're with, because today there were several different groups that came together. Black Lives Matter, different labor groups, people from certain unions. There were a lot of people that gathered. They wanted to honor MLK's legacy, and they also wanted to raise awareness to some of the issues that we are having here in the Bay Area, such as gentrification. They say that a lot of black families are being forced out of their homes. They also wanted to raise awareness about police violence and some of the shootings that have happened here over the years. So that's what was happening in Oakland. Then the group gathered and started marching here to Emeryville. That happened much earlier. I want to say we got there at around 11 o'clock. So this has been happening throughout the day. There were some road closures, and police did trail the group to make sure that everything stayed peaceful, which it did. Then they got here to Emeryville. They were supposed to end the protest at the mall behind me, but as we now know, quite a few have continued onto the Bay Bridge. It is causing a bit of a traffic nightmare for people up there, but from what we know, there's not any big issues right now, no huge conflicts. And again, the group did urge people to stay peaceful. Dan, Amma?
Yeah, and Alyssa, you know, we're taking a look at the scene now. It appears that some of the protesters are going back to their cars.
That could be. They're walking backward. And I also saw, Amma, as we pan back toward the Oakland area, a lot of people who look like motorists had gotten out of their cars and were standing around and maybe looking over the edge of the Bay Bridge, something you don't get to do very often when traffic is moving. So maybe they're taking an opportunity to see the view. But as Alyssa points out, these protests, while inconvenient, have thus far been peaceful, which, of course, anything else would be in direct conflict with the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King. And really, on this day to honor him, kind of an insult to his memory. So I think the protesters are keeping that very much in mind.
Yeah, and you can see where some of those people have gotten out of their vehicles because they're not moving at all, not knowing what to do. Some may not even know what's going on up ahead, but it did appear that the protesters were moving away from that front line where those initial cars had stopped and were linked together.
Around the Bay Area, try to keep enough gas in the tank for anything that might develop, because you never know when you're stuck in traffic. But I'm sure there are a few people sweating it out there with little gas in their tank.
Yeah, and you can see the motorcycles from the officers. And you can see some of the officers now gathered here in front. And there are fewer people than were here just a few moments ago gathered in front. But you can see they seem to be linked together in their arms. I can't exactly read what that says. No something on that armband that they are wearing together, but they have their arms up, and it looks like he's prepared to cut the chains, cut the links between those cars right there. You can see that worker.
Yeah, and apparently there's some tweets from protesters saying that the police are now telling anyone who is not involved in the protest to get back in their cars.
Yeah.
And of course,
makes sense.
You know, there'll be looky-loos and people want to see what's going on and check things out, but police are asking them, apparently, get back in your car, we'll take care of it. And you do see it's definitely a chain linking those cars together. And of course, this Black Health Matters was the signage that came up with this protest, but after all of the Black Lives Matters protests over this past summer because of shootings involving police and African Americans all around the country, and certainly here, police are very mindful of the need to not escalate things. They have been under a great deal of pressure and criticism around the country and around the Bay Area. So, police are doing their very best to keep things calm and as orderly as possible and get traffic moving again without turning this into something that it's not intended to be.
Right. And, as we said, it has been relatively peaceful. There was one woman who appeared to be shouting and, waving her arms and very animated. But for the most part, there doesn't seem to be a big confrontation. Police arrived. They pulled up those signs off the roadway that said Black Health Matters. They were large signs, and now they appear to be getting ready to cut the chains between the vehicles so they can get these cars off the road.
There we go.
He's working on it now.
And you notice the other protesters, many of them have their hands in the air, both hands in the air.
I think it says no justice. That's
I think you're right.
Says.
Yeah, that's right. No justice. Well, it's a little easier than harder than it looks to cut these chains, evidently. Look at this guy struggling with the bolt cutters. But
yeah, and you can see the driver of that vehicle just sitting inside with the chains linking them all together, keeping people from going about their day on this MLK Day.
I think we've gone to the second pair of bolt cutters to try those.
I think so. But police are working, doing the best they can, but the traffic now is backed up to the toll plaza, I'm sure beyond at this point, and people waiting, just trying to get through and get back to their day.
Yeah, now back to the original pair of bolt cutters. Let's see if those can do the job. Looks like the protesters brought heavy gauge chain for the job.
And we actually have somebody who is stuck in traffic. Ahmad Sultan, you're on the phone with us. Hello?
Hello, yes.
Hi, Ahmad. Thank you so much for joining us. So where are you on the bridge?
We're after the tolls on the Bay Bridge.
Okay. How long have you been stuck there?
Say almost 40 minutes.
Oh, my goodness. Now, did you even know what was going on?
No, I just recently checked Twitter to see maybe there's something up, like just traffic reports, and I saw all this, I guess, news about Black Lives Matter on the bridge. And what people are doing is they're chaining themselves on the bridge and basically just holding up traffic.
Yeah, in fact, as we're talking to you, we're watching police, I guess, detain, if you will, on the bridge one of the drivers of the vehicles who stopped and backed up all this traffic. What do you think? What's your reaction knowing what is holding you up at this point? Has it been keeping you stuck on the bridge for 40 minutes now?
I mean,
But I understand.
it's frustrating, but I understand, this has to get through across most people and more people, but I understand their message.
So you have, despite the inconvenience to you personally, you're sympathetic.
Yes.
Are you still in your car, or did you get out? Have you...
No, I'm still in my car, but there's a lot of people, videotaping on Snapchat and just stretching.
So, Ahmad, you're at the toll plaza. If you look behind you, how far does that line stretch? Can you even see the cars backed up behind you, the end of the cars behind you? Is it pretty bad?
Far as I can see.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where were you going?
We were just going to go eat some very good steak at Harris Ranch, but now I guess we can't eat steak anymore.
Well, you're just maybe a little later than you
We're from
intended.
Jersey, too.
Oh.
We're just here visiting.
You'll be good. Put it this way, Ahmad, you'll be very hungry when you get there.
Yes, and we're actually looking at the toll plaza right now with the cars just backed up. Do other people appear angry, frustrated at this point? Can you tell at all?
Yeah, some people are, agitated and just honking their horns. But now I just saw a couple of tow trucks actually just pass by, so I think they're going to start towing the cars.
Yeah, because they've been breaking the chains.
Now we see a woman now being detained, by the way. She has, this person has, Ahmad, thanks very much. Hang with us for a moment. We'll continue, but thank you, Ahmad. This woman is being detained, handcuffs or flex cuffs being placed on her. Her arms are behind her back. 2 officers there.
Yeah, and she didn't appear to be one of the drivers. I noticed her earlier as just one of the people kind of milling around, in the street. So I don't believe she was in one of those front cars, but they did take out one of the drivers of those cars.
Or she may have been in one of these vans. Though,
exactly,
may have been
exactly.
A part of
Anyway, but they're working on breaking those, using the bolt cutters, breaking up those.
And there's another person with their arms cuffed behind them. And again, everything is peaceful. This person is walking back unescorted with her. There we go. Now the police have their hands on him or her.
Yeah, and we're taking a look at all the backup, and Ahmad on the phone with us as he's been sitting there for 40 minutes, but understands and is sympathetic to the cause.
Yeah, now I see the protesters there being placed with their hands behind their backs, just sitting on the sidewalk, or sitting on the pavement, I should say. This is very civil and very, not very tense. Everybody, the protesters are just doing what they came to do, make a point, and cooperating, it looks like, with police in terms of at least not resisting. And police look like they're being pretty mellow about the whole thing as well. The only people probably not quite as mellow are some of the drivers back there, stuck and agitated because they can't get where they were going.
And now our Sky 7 HD, our live look here, is showing us a little more of that backup as it stretches now into the East Bay, to the toll plaza and beyond. You can't see it now, but we have a traffic camera showing the Skyway in San Francisco, and none of that traffic is going through, which is such a strange sight. And look at all the cars now just backed up. Yep, toll plaza and beyond.
Yeah. And so Ahmad Sultan, who was on the phone with us a few minutes ago, was right back there where the toll plaza is. That's where he's been stuck for about, I think he said about 45 minutes, didn't he, Anna?
Yeah, about 45 minutes now. And it's too bad, all those people who aren't going to know what's going on and just getting on into the toll plaza, and they're just going to get stuck not going anywhere at this point. And as we've been seeing for the past, if you're just tuning in, since we started at 4 o'clock, we've been watching this traffic back up on the Bay Bridge after these protesters made their way to the front there. You can see this is on the eastern span where they drove out to the front. They had chains connecting the cars, not letting any cars by, but police are actively trying to break those chains using bolt cutters and getting people moving again.
Yeah, and despite the thousands of cars now probably backed up, imagine if this was a normal day, not a holiday, as it is this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. There'd be far more cars impacted by this. Traffic going the other direction, not impacted significantly at all, really, although it's a bit slow getting onto the Bay Bridge the other direction now. But as we hit the commute time, even though it's a holiday.
There it is.
There we go.
Yeah, Skyway.
So the Skyway is kind of slow. Those cars coming at you with the headlights are trying to get onto the Bay Bridge. There is no protest on that side of the span, but things could just be slow because of normal traffic.
32 SQC advising it's okay to bring the 2 fire engines runway.
Impacts traffic around here. But if you looked at the other side, clear sailing, maybe a couple dozen cars on that side of the road.
Yeah, and apparently this is of 96 hours of this protest and this point that they are making. Excuse me, a lot of people are on Twitter. Obviously, I've been checking Twitter and tweeting out images for people so they can see what's going on. You can see the protesters are tweeting. This says prioritizing justice on this day. You can see there, and they're using the hashtag 96 hours. That's kind of how they're...
So the bolt cutters have been doing their job, cutting the chains between these cars. One of the guys that was stuck in traffic, who was kind enough to call in, said he saw tow trucks passing his position, which was backwards, probably a quarter mile or so. I
guess they chained themselves across the bridge a little while ago, and they police brutality flyer. Called hashtag MLK Shut It Down. They're claiming they're going to have 96 hours of direct action. I'm not quite sure whether they meant to hold off the bridge for 96 hours, but they are asking, they have a set of demands, asking for the resignations of police chiefs and mayors. And I have a guy here named June Manuel. He's a tourist from the Philippines. This happened right in front of his car. June, can you tell me about it?
Yeah, we were driving and everything
stopped when all of the cars stopped and all of them started going out, and then the RP was out of his vehicle, which is a white Toyota Highlander, when a gray Chevrolet Malibu, Toyota 6 Tomboy Edward 533, which returns clear to a job site Chevrolet Porto Edison Lorenzo, decided to drive up the emergency lane and hit his leg. Then the driver of that vehicle, described as a black male adult, 6 foot 180, last wearing green jacket, got out of the vehicle and threatened him with a sledgehammer. RP is declining 1141 and will file 1110 counter at a later time if needed. He's requesting broadcast only for the subject vehicle at this time. Leading broadcast for 415 subject vehicle. It occurred westbound 80 ECTI approximately 10 ago. It's going to be a gray Chevrolet Malibu driven by a black male adult, and he was armed with a sledgehammer. Going it clear WK 355 at 1625.
A parking lot with people walking around. I see a guy walking around with his dog. People are taking pictures. And you mentioned, June, that they asked for bolt cutters, the police.
Yeah, I heard one cop asking for a bolt cutter from one of the car owners. So I think they wanted to do something. They want to cut the chain.
All right. Well, you heard it from one of the people who was right there when it happened and all of the traffic got shut down. This westbound side of the Bay Bridge is a virtual parking lot. People are out of their cars, walking around. We're not quite sure when this is going to end.
Yeah, and Alan, so the 96 hours is actually 96 hours of protests, not necessarily here on the Bay Bridge. You mentioned them passing out flyers. So those are protesters going around just passing out to drivers flyers?
Yes, they are. Hey, June, tell us how you received this flyer.
One of the organizers handed it out.
And this organizer, was this organizer chained
your
up?
radio is 10-1 breaking. I can't copy anything.
Walking, giving food and then flyers.
Okay, so
There's Oreo and oranges.
Okay, so there seems to be a support network or group around these protesters who are chained across the bridge.
That's what it
3226,
looks
you're
like.
still type 1, but I believe you are just wanting to confirm that there's 3 bridge trucks that are going to be wrong way from PI. I have to go land bridge in a few once I get off Land Island, San Francisco. I'll call them.
So I'm having my picture taken at the Bay Bridge.
Okay, quite an experience for you, June. Thank you very much. Alma and Dan, that's the latest out here on the Bay Bridge.
Well, there's an optimist, isn't it?
Yes.
Having his picture taken on the Bay Bridge and making the best of it, which, frankly, is all you can do if you're stuck in this mess.
Yeah, we
now
see
you
people
some
running. Yeah, they're running away from that line where they had stopped and...
Now, are these protesters or motorists?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And the cars with balloons, are they part of the organized protests? It's hard to tell at this point, but yeah, people are
You see a
running.
lot of police vehicles there on the upper portion of your screen, one after the other. So the police have responded in large numbers, as you can see. You look at one SUV after another from the Highway Patrol. There's an orange tow truck there belonging to Caltrans.
And we counted maybe about 16 people have been detained at this point, and they're up toward the front of the line where those cars were stopped. But you can see the back of it. Look at the eastbound traffic just slowly, just moving along, but the sea of cars just stuck, now extending beyond the toll plaza at this point. You can see them gathering. You can see where the end of that backup is there.
And again, if this was a normal day, not a national holiday, it would be even worse. But certainly don't tell that to anyone stuck in this traffic. It's going to be quite some time before that clears, it looks like, because the next thing they have to do, they've got the protesters dealt with. And again, they've been very peaceful, looks like cooperative in terms of not resisting or fighting. But certainly recalcitrant in terms of wanting to stay up there as long as they possibly can to make their point. The challenge now for police, or the next step, is what to do with the protesters. They'll have to get some sort of a van or vehicle to move them if they're going to actually arrest them.
And it looks like they've moved some of those vehicles out of the way, and you can see that CHP,
I was actually online trying to figure that out.
are still in, and they could just drive the cars off to the side.
Call him
Well, they
directly.
got the keys from the
protesters,
right, but
start to notify San Francisco when they get to the bottom of the eastbound
maybe at
ramp
least
that
get a
you'll have
lane
to
or
go
two
that way.
open.
Yeah, if people could even start crawling through, that would obviously be advantageous at this point.
But, you know, this was clearly a very well thought out. They knew exactly how they were going to do this and drive in a line together, covering every single lane of traffic, stop at once, and then get out, chain the cars together. So it was a well thought out plan, a well organized plan.
Yeah, that's part of this movement that they're doing on, on social media. They're using the hashtag 96 hours of protests, not necessarily here on the Bay Bridge, but we have been seeing other protests today across Oakland. Marchers went to Emeryville on this MLK Day. They're trying to get their point across, and they are doing it peacefully, but some of the marchers from Oakland went to Emeryville, and that happens to be where last year police shot and killed a woman who was suspected of shoplifting. So a lot of people are trying to get their point across on this day.
Which, they've done so thus far in a very peaceful way, which of course is appropriate on this holiday. It was a hallmark of Dr. King's teachings and practices as he organized civil disobedience around the country.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s, and so today these protesters have chosen to honor Dr. King's memory by conducting a civil act of civil disobedience themselves, and to make a point that they feel needs to be made.
Yeah, and we actually have someone from Caltrans on the phone right now. We have Leah Robinson-Leach. Leah, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us about the effort to get traffic flowing again here on the westbound lanes of the Bay Bridge?
Well, as you can see, the CHP are working quite quickly to ensure that this situation is progressively moved forward so that the traveling public can continue to come through the lanes. We want to, emphasize that the safety of both the protesters, the CHP, the traveling public, our workers as well, is our priority. And so in an effort to do that, the CHP, as you can see, have worked very strategically in gaining access to the cars, cutting the protesters away from each other so that we can do everything to move traffic along. And it is our priority. I can't emphasize enough the safety of all parties involved is our priority. And so as we get traffic flowing, then CHP, as well as any other local enforcement agencies, will address the protesters.
And it looks like we're seeing some people on motorcycles moving through, and maybe even some regular cars.
Maybe we're getting a little bit emotional. Leah, do you have any? This obviously, I would assume this caught you completely by surprise. But how quickly are contingency plans able to be put into place when something like this arises? I know you guys plan for these sorts of things, drill for these sorts of things. How quickly can you respond typically?
Well, we can respond within a few moments. The bridge is constantly being surveyed and watched for both cars that are disabled as well as any other unusual activity. So we have our processes in place so that any challenging circumstances can be immediately addressed, both by Caltrans, our tow trucks, as well as our CHP enforcement component, because we work right along with them. So we are ready and able to address any concerns like this, with the priority of safety of all involved being what we focus on.
Okay, Leah Robinson, thank you very much for coming on. We appreciate it very much, from Caltrans, Leah Robinson-Leach. And it looks like traffic is moving in a couple of lanes at least. And you saw the protesters there sitting along the side of the bridge by the concrete barrier on the side, almost unattended. The police are watching them, but they're not causing any trouble. They're just sitting there patiently and quietly.
Are they pushing that vehicle off to the side? It
looks like that a little bit. Yeah, maybe they were.
Yeah, but we're, at least it is encouraging that we're starting to see some traffic moving
either they didn't have the keys for that vehicle, or it ran out of gas.
One of the two, either one. Yeah, but we are starting to see some traffic moving, which I'm sure motorists are just relieved at this point. We spoke to one man maybe 15 minutes ago who had already been stuck for 40 minutes at the toll plaza.
So it's been about an hour or so-ish that they have been stuck, slowed down like this. But they are definitely moving things on. They are pushing that car, it looks like.
Yeah, with a couple people inside. And police were very quick to get out there and get those mats, those signs that said Black Health Matters out of the roadway right away. And then they got somebody with the bolt cutters. Leah Robinson-Leach with Caltrans says they can respond basically in just moments to these sort of situations, and they did move quite quickly. Oh, and there's your drive time traffic map.
So we've got 3 lanes now, the 3 right-hand lanes heading westbound into San Francisco open once again. This backup was in the new section of the bridge, right before you get to the tunnel, the center anchorage. 3 lanes now open, and so traffic is moving in. But as you look there at the drive time traffic, real-time look, you can see the backup that this protest has caused. Thousands and thousands of cars. Of course, it would have been far more significant in terms of the impact to drivers had this not been a national holiday. Commuters are pretty light today generally.
Yeah, but still, anybody getting caught in that backup isn't happy at this point. But they're starting to get things moving, and you can see they've moved some of those vehicles off to the side that were initially blocking the area. They've detained at least 24 people at this point. They pulled some of those drivers out of those cars, not necessarily pulled physically, but
there was no roughness, but it was
they came out of the car, and most people were calm as they took truck.
The protesters weren't causing any trouble.
There's one lady who appeared to be shouting and very animated, but
and actually some of her fellow protesters seemed to be trying to calm her down, from what you can tell. Yeah. And our friend Ahmad, who was stuck in traffic and called in, looks like Ahmad will get his steak dinner that he was heading to the city for after all. It'll just be a little later than he planned.
Yeah, he was in this area, the Bay Bridge toll plaza, where it's just all backed up. But fortunately, we're seeing on the other end, these poor people don't know it, but the traffic is starting to move at the very front, and you can see a tow truck there. Probably now that they move those cars off to the side, if they can get them out of there, then potentially they can get all of the lanes open and really get things going.
Probably make them better if they would get free tolls for the day just because
that might make people happier.
Let's suggest that to Caltrans. So again, 3 lanes on the right-hand side now open again, but the traffic was stopped completely, stopped dead on the western span of the Bay Bridge before the center anchorage, before the tunnel, by this line of cars that stopped and literally with pretty heavy chains chained each car to one another, and it took police. The protesters were not removing those chains on their own. Police had to cut them with bolt cutters. So the entire span was choked off for about an hour, maybe a little more than an hour.
Yeah, and those were some pretty good chains, too.
Yeah,
Some using a couple of bolt cutters to try to get through those. But, you know, they managed to get through it pretty quickly and get those cars moved off to the side. I know it doesn't really help those people too much in back. It probably doesn't make them feel much better because, you know, with every minute that goes by, traffic was backing up even farther across the span and into the East Bay, but things are starting to slowly get moving again in the front.
Look at the, to give you a contrast on what kind of traffic day it is. Normally at this time of day, of course, the eastbound lanes, the ones at the top half of your screen, would be packed with cars commuting out of the city. But it is a national holiday, so it's a light traffic day, so you get a sense of just how light it really is, if it not for this traffic backup.
Yeah, and there weren't, you know, we see a lot of protests with a lot of people. There weren't a ton of protesters out there, a couple dozen perhaps.
Yeah, at the most,
They were just in the front area, but then they seemed to disperse. And we're talking to our reporter, Alan Wong, who mentioned that he talked to a driver who had received a flyer. So they were passing out the protesters were passing out flyers to people who were stuck on the Bay Bridge.
Which probably helps, at least for those stuck drivers, to know, hey, what are we doing up here?
Is there an accident? What's going on?
Why are you guys doing this? At least give them some sense of what the purpose of this was. And again, if you're just tuning in, the purpose of this was, in terms of the signage that the protesters brought with them, Black Health Matters, which of course is a play on the protest this summer, Black Lives Matter, that happened around the Bay Area many times and around the country after a series of officer-involved shootings, police officers shooting African Americans in various cities around the country, including here.
And there have been a lot of protests today on this Martin Luther King Jr. today, very peaceful, because they wanted to, you know, do the way that he would do it and not have anything too disruptive. But we were talking to our reporter, Alyssa Harrington, earlier. She was following a protest that started in Oakland, and they marched all the way to Emeryville. It began at 14th and Broadway in Oakland, and it's kind of at the Bay Street Mall area right now in Emeryville, and that's where she had been stationed. And she said they'd been relatively peaceful as well, just trying to get their message across at this point.
Well, and making this at least a little bit smoother operation and a little less concerning for people stuck in it. At least it's not, as it may be in a little while, storming. Rain and wind and everything else. So at least we've got some clear-ish skies for the moment, not any rain to speak of to slow down or hamper the effort to move the cars and the protesters out of the way. Now, of course, they're not going to let these protesters just hop back in their cars and drive their vehicles off. So presumably those protesters will be released on their own reconnaissance at some point, but they're not going to let them just jump in their car. So they're going to have to move those cars, and you can see Caltrans pulling in tow trucks now to get those cars off the bridge. They'll get the protesters off, then they get the cars off the bridge, and then they can open all lanes of traffic instead of just 3, which are open at the moment.
Yeah, so we continue to cover this protest that stopped traffic on the westbound lanes of the Bay Bridge. We are following it on Twitter at ABC 7 News Bay Area. We're following it online, giving you the latest, and we will check back on that in just a few moments, but we want to take a quick break. Stay right here.
Before we move on to some other matters, to this breaking news we've been focused on, a protest on this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday that has been entirely peaceful, an act of civil disobedience under the banner Black Health Matters, which we still want more details on exactly what they represent here today, but kind of playing off the Black Lives protests that we saw this summer. All lanes of westbound Bay Bridge traffic were shut down by several cars that chained themselves to each other and about a couple dozen protesters milling around. There was never any problem in terms of violence or tension. Police and protesters both acted very calmly. And as you look back from Sky 7 HD at the traffic headache that this caused a little more than an hour ago when it started, thousands of cars, stuck in traffic trying to get into San Francisco and beyond. This is on the new span of the Bay Bridge, right before you get to the center anchorage, the tunnel, and Sky 7 HD bringing you back now toward the protesters. The good news is it looks like about 3 lanes of traffic are open. They've pulled all the cars to the left-hand side of the road, couple of lanes. They're getting tow trucks in there. The protesters have been removed. So traffic is moving again, but it's going to be some time, obviously, before everything gets back to normal. We'll stay on this story and keep you up to date, but we want to move on to some other matters.
Yeah, Dan, of course, that is